You know, sometimes the internet throws stories at us that sound so outrageous, you almost want to believe they're just wild conspiracies. And yet the more you dig, the more the pieces start to line up. And suddenly you realize you're not looking at some random online rumor, you're looking at a disturbing reality that feels stranger than fiction. That's exactly how I felt when I started piecing together everything surrounding David and this whole tangled mess involving not just one but multiple women named Celeste. At first glance, it honestly seemed like people were confused, like maybe names were getting mixed up, identities were blurred, and this whole narrative was being spun out of proportion. But the deeper I went, the more I realized the confusion itself is part of the story, and maybe even part of the way David operated, whether intentionally or not. Because when you have multiple women with the same name connected to you and their lives overlap in suspicious ways, it gives you a convenient shield, a way for defenders to say everyone's got it wrong, that you were with someone older, not younger, and that all these accusations are nothing more than a misunderstanding. And yet, when people who were actually there step forward and say, no, they met both, they spoke to both, they were in the same room with both, then suddenly the excuse of confusion doesn't hold up so well anymore. I think what unsettled me most while learning about this case wasn't even the crime itself, as horrific as it is, but the way so many people jumped up immediately to defend David as if there was no possibility that he could have been involved in something so dark. They say he was only with the older Celeste, that she's still alive, she was of age, and the rest of this is just internet drama. But let's be real, if you look at the details, the timelines, and the testimony from people who actually knew both Celestes, you can't deny there's something deeply suspicious happening here. On one side, we have Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a 15-year-old girl who should still be alive today. Her body was discovered, her tattoo identified, and her family confirmed that she had a boyfriend named David. On the other side, we have Celeste Herrera, who is in her 20s, someone who has been seen engaging with David online, someone who not only shares the name but eerily resembles the younger Celeste in looks and even mannerisms. And that similarity alone is enough to make anyone pause, because what are the odds? People don't just stumble across two women with the same name, the same appearance, and the same connection to them, unless there's some sort of obsession or deliberate pattern. Now, some have tried to romanticize this and say maybe the older Celeste was like a replacement, a way for David to fill the void left by the younger one, but I don't buy that explanation. To me, it feels more like misdirection, a smokescreen. Think about it, if people are debating over which Celeste is which, if some fans can point to the older one and say, see, that's her, she's alive, she's fine, then it makes it a lot harder for everyone to focus on the truth of what happened to the younger Celeste. It's like creating just enough confusion that you can slip through the cracks. And to me, that's not coincidence, that's strategy. What makes it even worse is the testimonies of people who were actually there. They talk about both Celestes being at the same gatherings, one of them being called Cece whenever the younger one was around, as if she needed to differentiate herself in those moments, even though in any other setting she'd just go by Celeste. Why would she switch up her name like that unless it was specifically to accommodate the presence of the younger girl? That's not something you do if you've never met her. That's not something you do if you had no connection. And yet, here we are with the older Celeste claiming she never knew the younger one, despite photos showing them together, despite accounts from people who say they saw them interact. That kind of lie is not just suspicious, it's calculated, and it makes me wonder what else she might be trying to cover up. Then there's the issue of how David acted around the younger Celeste. Multiple people have described how, during live streams, he would deliberately move her out of the frame, out of the room, away from the spotlight. And on the surface, you could say maybe he didn't want to put her on camera, maybe he thought he was protecting her privacy, but when you put it together with everything else, the way he insisted she was older than she was, the way he got defensive when people questioned her age, the way he seemed intent on hiding her presence, it paints a much darker picture. It looks less like privacy and more like concealment, less like protection and more like covering his tracks. And I can't ignore that, because I've seen this pattern before in other cases where someone knew deep down what they were doing was wrong, and so they tried to erase evidence in real time, controlling who saw what, controlling what was shared publicly. And the speculation only grows darker from there. There are whispers that David may have gotten the younger Celeste pregnant, and if that truth had come out, it would have destroyed his career, his image, his future. Some believe that fear may have pushed him into making choices that can never be undone. And while we can't confirm those rumors, the fact that they exist at all shows how deeply suspicious people have become about his behavior. And then, as if the story wasn't bizarre enough already, talk of a third Celeste enters the mix. Someone else tied to him through a song, another woman with the same name woven into his narrative. At that point, you really have to ask yourself, is this all just coincidence? Or is there some deeper obsession with the name itself, some fixation that he couldn't let go of? Meanwhile, David's career has completely collapsed. He's been dropped by his label, cut from festivals, abandoned by collaborators. The industry that once welcomed him with open arms has now shut the door, and it's hard not to notice the timing. His new album, which was supposed to be released, carried the title Essence. For those who don't know, that's a term describing the way dead leaves cling to a tree even after they've died, hanging on long after they should have fallen away. And when you think about that symbolism in the context of everything we know, it feels chilling. Holding onto what's dead, refusing to let go, clinging to something that should have been released, it almost mirrors the way people describe his attachment to Celeste. It's eerie, almost as if his art was revealing more about him than he realized, or maybe more than he intended us to notice. But here's the thing, this isn't the first time warning signs popped up. As far back as 2024, there were already people online raising alarms about his interactions with underage girls. One case in particular involved a 13-year-old on TikTok, and the receipts are still out there, the comments still visible. At the time, most people brushed it off, maybe because his career wasn't as big yet, maybe because people didn't want to believe it. But a small corner of the internet never forgot, and now, in hindsight, it feels like those early red flags were completely ignored. If people had taken them seriously back then, maybe things wouldn't have escalated to this point. Even the way he first met Celeste points to a concerning pattern. They connected through online gaming spaces, places like Fortnite and Discord, which are filled with kids, and that's how she was introduced to his world. Friends recall him encouraging her to join Discord servers, pulling her deeper into his orbit, and others remember her admitting that he mistreated her, sometimes even joking about harming her. And the fact that she laughed it off, unsure if he was serious or not, shows just how manipulative the dynamic really was. She was a child, he was older, and he was able to normalize behavior that should have been taken as a massive red flag. Now, investigators are combing through all of this: social media accounts, collaborative Spotify playlists, private messages, deleted posts, and slowly piecing together the trail he left behind. Her sister has spoken out too, saying the family never really knew David personally, only knew of him, but confirmed what mattered most: Celeste was only 15, and she should still be here. She trusted someone who didn't protect her, and now they're left with grief and unanswered questions. To me, that's the part that hits the hardest, because at the end of the day, this isn't just an internet scandal or a story for headlines. It's about a family that lost their daughter, about a teenager whose life was cut short, and about the failure of the adults around her to step in when they should have. And while all this has been unfolding, people have started noticing suspicious behavior on Reddit, with posts about David being quietly deleted, raising suspicions that he's been using burner accounts to scrub his name. At the same time, his manager Josh Marshall has distanced himself. Even though he was the one who helped secure David's house and was around during all of this, Josh has ties to other controversial artists too, and while he may be stepping back now, it's hard not to wonder how much he knew all along. It's the same with other collaborators, celebrities who were seen casually hanging out with David, singing in the kitchen, laughing like everything was normal, even though we now know what he was allegedly involved in. I can't even imagine how they must feel now, realizing they were spending time with someone tied to something so horrifying. The conversation has even shifted to whether David created an environment so toxic and suffocating that Celeste may have been pushed into harming herself. Some argue that's possible, that the manipulation and abuse broke her spirit, while others point to the brutality of what happened and say it's impossible to believe she did it alone. Personally, I think the truth lies in the fact that, either way, she was trapped in a situation no child should ever have been in, and David was at the center of it. And then there are his own words, his own clips, where he casually talks about violence in his music, almost proud when his mother recoiled at the lyrics. To him, her shock wasn't a warning, it was validation. He laughed, said he must be onto something, and released the song, watching it go viral overnight. To me, that's terrifying. Because instead of stopping to reflect, instead of wondering if maybe the darkness in his art was reflecting something wrong inside him, he doubled down and took success as approval. And that's the danger of fame. It can take someone's worst instincts and amplify them, reward them until they spiral out of control. So here we are, with so many unanswered questions, so many theories, and so many contradictions. Did he target women named Celeste deliberately? Was the older Celeste complicit in creating confusion? How much did his team know? How much was covered up along the way? And most importantly, will there be justice for the younger Celeste, or will this be another case where fame and connections allow someone to slip away unpunished? At this point, I don't think anyone's really confused anymore. The coincidences are too many, the evidence too heavy, the testimonies too consistent. The idea that this is all just a misunderstanding doesn't hold up, not when you look closely. And while David may have tried to hide behind the fog of multiple Celestes, behind lies and denials, I don't think he can hide forever. Because every day, more people are speaking out, more evidence surfaces, and the truth becomes harder and harder to ignore. And as much as this story is disturbing, as much as it makes you want to look away, we can't, because that's exactly how situations like this go unchecked. We owe it to Celeste and to every other young person put in harm's way to keep talking about it, to demand answers, and to make sure the system doesn't fail her the way the adults in her life already did.